Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me. This is Kathy, and today I'll be sharing a double easel card using the Squishy Hugs stamp set and the Block Party Bunnies die from Tailored Expressions. And I wanted to show you how this card actually works. So I'm going to show you that here really quick, and then we'll just jump right into creating the card. I started out with a piece of cardstock that measures 11 by 4¼ inches. And then I scored that at 5½ inches. That is actually going to be the big card base. And a little trick I've found after I scored it, my corners weren't quite lined up. So I hold those corners in place and then use my bone folder and kind of scrape it at an angle. And then it straightens it out so that my score lines are even. The next piece is 5½ inches by 4¼ and I scored that at 2¼ and 4�3/8 inches. So for this piece, this is the front piece that kind of folds out a little bit. I guess it's the first easel. And after I scored them, I burnished it really well with my bone folder. And as I get further along in the video, just to make it clear, I'm going to start naming these things. You do want to score them so that the large flap, that one is going to be a mountain fold, and then the small flap is going to be a valley fold. On a side note, I used 110-pound cardstock Nina Classic Crest just so that my card base would be really very sturdy. Next, I grabbed the Block Party Bunny die. I placed the die right below the score line on the front panel of what will be the front panel of the easel card. I ran that through my Gemini Junior, and then I reinforced that fold to make sure that it was still nice and crisp. Now, to get the little faces and bow ties stamped on those bunnies, I watched a video from Tailored Expressions and learned a little trick because the stamps are cling mounted. I put my panel into my stamp platform, and then I cut a piece of acetate to 4¼ by 5½. And I placed it over the bunnies, and then I used a piece of Scotch removable tape just to hold it into place in my platform. Next, I lined up the stamp sort of where I kind of thought their little eyes and nose would be stamped onto the image, and inked it up with my favorite things, Extreme Black Hybrid ink. Then I closed the door of my stamp platform, and I'm actually stamping on the acetate. So now I know where that stamp will actually stamp on the bunnies. And after I clean off the excess ink off my platform, I'm going to remove the magnets and then slide the card up until I'm happy with the placement of where the eyes and nose will stamp. Then I lifted up the acetate, and that's why I put the tape up on the top of the acetate so it would create that little hinge so I could just leave it attached to my platform but move it easily. Then I ink up the stamp with the Extreme Black Hybrid ink, close the door, and voila! The eyes and the nose are stamped exactly where I want them to be. I did clean off the black ink from the acetate just so I didn't get too much of a muddy mess. Then I put the little bow tie stamp into my stamp platform. I inked it up with sour apple ink from my favorite things. And again, I flipped that acetate down and stamped directly on the acetate. And again, I moved my card panel around underneath the acetate so I could line up where I wanted the bow ties to actually stamp, and then did the actual stamping. And a big important note here is you want to move your cardstock and not the acetate because the stamp is already in position on the door of my stamp platform. So I finished up the stamping, and now I kind of show you how it looks when the front easel part is closed with those bunnies stamped, and I think that it's just so cute adding the little bow ties. The next thing I did was I stamped my sentiment using VersaFine Onyx Black ink onto a piece of 80-pound Nina Solar White cardstock, and my little Rupert there was making sure that I had it lined up just right. I ran that through my Gemini Junior with a circled eye. Next, I had cut a piece of patterned paper to 4�3/8 by 2¼ inches. I'll also have all the measurements and all the supplies listed in the description below, so don't feel like you have to write everything down. Anyway, I adhered the patterned paper so that it would show behind the bunnies. Then I used my tape runner and I adhered the small flap onto the front of the actual card base. And that's why the small flap needs to be a valley fold, and the big flap on the smaller cardstock piece is a mountain fold, so that the double easel will actually stand up correctly. There was a little bit of an overhang of the blue and white polka dot paper, so I did trim that off. I cut down a piece of patterned paper, and that patterned paper is from My Favorite Things, and I cut it to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 and used AdTech tape runner to attach that. And then I made a little mark with my pencil to trim off the bottom part of the white edge underneath the bunnies. I adhered the white sentiment circle to the scalloped circle with my AdTech tape runner, added some foam tape to the back of that, and put that on the front of the card. And here I had pressed the bunnies down and I thought I had my circle up high enough, and I didn't. So here I'm trying to see if I can get those bunnies to tuck under, and I couldn't. And I figured, oh, it's fine. It's not going to make that much of a difference. I wanted to add another little sentiment on the front of the card. So I stamped that sentiment onto 80-pound Neenah Classic Crest cardstock, again with VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is my favorite ink for stamping sentiments. Then I just used my paper trimmer to trim it down into a rectangle. And then I adhered that onto a piece of the same blue and white polka dot paper and trimmed it down so that there would just be a slight frame around that. I adhered that on the front of the card, but I adhered it behind the taller easel part so that when the recipient pulls the bottom down, they'll see that sentiment. And then there's also plenty of room on the inside of the card for another message. And that's it. That finishes up my card for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, I'd love it if you would. And don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.